The most difficult task faced by Newberry Hill Heritage Park stewards is to balance recreational use of the park with protection of the upland and wetland, plant and wildlife communities. With no snowpack in Kitsap County, it is imperative that we do everything we can to reduce runoff and retain our rainwater in our uplands and wetlands to provide clean water for wildlife and ensure late summer stream flows for juvenile fish. Not all wetlands are obvious, but this is a wetland. Here, the presence of hydrophilic plants and deep organic soils indicate this is a late seral stage wetland. Hardhack dominates this wetland. The presence of Labrador tea along the transition from wetland to upland hints that this wetland may become a true bog. It is the first wetland to collect and direct rainwater to an unnamed tributary to Wildcat Creek. Clahalia Secondary School is surrounded by the park and straddles two watersheds, Little Anderson to the north flowing into Hood Canal and Chico to the south flowing into Dyes Inlet. Raindrops falling on the school roof and parking lots are collected and directed into county retention ponds, where contaminants are removed prior to entering the headwater wetland. Following the wetlands south, we cross Old Loop Road at Culvert 5, where beaver are actively creating a meadow and expanding their territory. Nearby, beaver seek shelter in a bank den during periods of high water. A small seasonal stream begins to form at Culvert 5 and flows south into the park's largest wetland. This stream contains gravel that we hope will support spawning coho and cutthroat trout in the future. The stunning variety of native aquatic plants in this wetland easily explains its designation by the State Department of Natural Resources as a wetland of high conservation value. Under the Washington State Department of Ecology Wetland Rating System for Western Washington, this wetland is a Category 1 and is also listed as a Kitsap County critical area. Hard-stemmed bulrush, or tule, were used by Salish peoples to make baskets, mats, and walls for temporary shelters. Migrating waterfowl raft here in winter. After fall rains drown the floating vegetation, waterfowl are able to land, rest, and feed as they prepare for their trip north to nesting grounds in Canada. The wide variety of soft mast in the riparian zone and uplands makes this area an ideal feeding ground for many species of birds. Raptors hunt along the ecotone, and bats and swallows catch insects over the open water. Most forest stands in the park are disturbed habitat and were once managed by Department of Natural Resources for fiber production. The young stand on the left transitions to second growth at the Section 36 line, marking the northern boundary of the urban wildlife easement that was purchased with RCO funds. Everything you could want in a healthy wetland is found here. The large woody debris and small woody debris create niche habitats and microenvironments for many forms of life. They provide shelter from predators and shade to keep the water cool. Primary production here is driven by photosynthesis, and the shallow waters allow production from the surface to the bottom. The presence of green algae and plants make this area more productive than a tropical rainforest. Forested wetlands along the shoreline provide moist soils for smooth-skinned amphibians, whose skin must remain moist in order to breathe. Pacific tree frogs and red-legged frogs use this permanent body of water to deposit egg masses prior to returning to the damp woods. The taller stand of trees in the distance marks the western boundary of the park. The younger stand near the water was planted around 1985 after a clear cut right down to the water's edge. State law once permitted this, but today this is not allowed. Standing dead trees are a source of food for all species of woodpeckers found in the park. The cavities created while searching for insects become cavity nesting sites for wood ducks and other cavity nesting species. Salmonids spend their lives at sea converting sunlight to protein. The mature fish return, bringing proteins and trace elements back into our streams and ponds. When they die, their bodies provide nutrients for the next generation of fish, as well as food for wildlife and plant communities far into the uplands. The surface water level here is augmented by a large beaver dam that blocks the outlet of the glacial valley. The wetland below the dam has been culturally eutrophied by creation of a logging road around 1950. The road acts as a dam and prevents normal stream functions. Preliminary efforts have begun to remove 5 culverts and build a bridge here that would restore normal stream functions and allow juvenile fish passage upstream. South of the Seebeck Highway, the glacial valley narrows, and 6 beaver dams pond water in gentle terraces as the elevation drops. These ponds are ideal habitat for many amphibians and birds. Juvenile coho and sea-run cutthroat trout use this habitat for over a year before heading to sea. As of the summer of 2015, this is as far upstream as salmonids have been documented. The juvenile fish are currently unable to reach the rich habitat upstream of the Seebeck Highway. Recent riparian restoration projects along this stretch include planting grand fir and Sitka spruce to mitigate bear-damaged firs. Noxious weeds were removed from a large meadow and ladder fuels reduced within the riparian zone. Long-range plans for this area include a sustainable trail that will lead from the park to Belfair by way of the Green Mountain Forest. The outfall of the last dam forms a stream that joins Wildcat Creek on its way to Lost Creek and Chico Creek to terminate in Dyes Inlet. The western branch of Little Anderson Creek forms here and flows north to the Hood Canal. The stream channel forms at the outfall of a beaver dam, and the thalweg is deeply incised to the hard pan. This is the headwater wetland for Little Anderson Creek. The pond is filled with leaves and litter that feed a large variety of macroinvertebrates. These tiny creatures start a complex food web that's essential to juvenile salmonids. Macroinvertebrate populations can be used as an indicator of pollution. The presence or absence of sensitive species can generally be used to monitor water quality. Dragonfly and damselfly naiads emerge from the pond and become efficient winged predators, catching insects in the air. The presence of mayflies, caddisflies, stoneflies, and snails is a good indication this pond is pollution-free. Dissolved oxygen is probably the most critical of all substances found in natural waters. Needed by almost all living organisms, it is an indicator of metabolic activity in ponds and streams. When managing a forest for biodiversity, it's all about habitat. The stand of large trees on the right is a healthy forest. There's a mix of mature trees, decadent trees, and logs, dominant trees, shade-tolerant trees, and diverse plant species. There's a complex canopy, young trees and understory development, and large rotting logs on the forest floor. Healthy stands are in limited supply in the park, but this one in the North 250 is approaching old growth. It is prime habitat for a wide variety of wildlife. It stands guard over our streams and wetlands and buffers and protects them from our incursions. The young stand pictured here is the result of a clear cut around 1990. In 2014, it was thinned using variable density thinning. This stand was managed as a monoculture by the Department of Natural Resources for timber production. As with any other crop, competing species were removed, making more abiotic resources available for Douglas fir production. Once managed by DNR for timber production, about half the park is composed of disturbed habitat with single species, single canopy, even-aged Douglas fir. With county acquisition of these lands and creation of the park, the forest management objective changed from timber production to managing for forest health, biodiversity, and wildlife habitat. In 2014, this stand was thinned using variable density thinning techniques to reduce stand stocking to about 140 trees per acre. A generous buffer was left undisturbed adjacent to the Little Anderson Beaver Pond. The single row of tall trees visible along the edge of the wetland was the buffer for the clear cut in 1990. When thinning for habitat, individual trees of this age are spaced approximately 17 feet apart to allow canopy development in full sunlight. Clumps of 2 to 6 trees are left to create dense thickets that provide heavy cover for wildlife. Openings are created to help with production of soft mast and understory development by allowing sunlight to reach the forest floor. Areas that have a good mix of habitat, hardwoods and firs, are left unthinned. These areas are called skips. After thinning, shade-tolerant species are planted to help create a mid-story canopy.